Welcome to Tech News of the Week with your host, the fleeting ambition of youth.
Welcome to the Tech News of the Week, where Chris and I examine 4 articles that we found interesting in the news. I handled the main and very long episode around BGP this week. So, Chris, why don't you kick us off with something that caught your eye?
Heads up, this is all going to be about Apple because they had their Worldwide Developers Conference and everything.
Indeed.
And I will heroically refrain from making it a full main. You're welcome.
And we thank you for that.
In the meantime, Apple is paying OpenAI in exposure. Fresh in from the We Learned Nothing from the U2 debacle department, this is amazing. Apple, in its recent Worldwide Developers Conference, announced a whole spate of AI things that are coming to the iPhone and, by extension, to the desktop. In the long term, they are enthusiastic about using their own LLM, which they're creatively titling Apple Intelligence. Get it? Did you see the initials? It's AI. It's Apple Intelligence. Did you get it?
I got it.
Did you get the joke?
Anyway,
in the shorter term, they're going to be using OpenAI.
Of course.
Primarily because, unlike Apple Intelligence, OpenAI is a thing that exists. And how Apple is paying for this, might you be asking yourself?
I might.
Well, unbelievably, apparently, they're not.
Oh.
They are literally paying OpenAI in exposure. That's right. The same way that your weirdo cousin, the totally legit DJ, gets ripped off by First Friday festivals in Skokie, Illinois, OpenAI apparently gets $0 from this deal, but so many people get to see it. So what they get to say is their product is being used by Apple. Phenomenal negotiating skills on display here, folks. Because nobody has heard of ChatGPT before.
No
notes, nothing. All of this is obviously a stopgap, right? Before Apple Intelligence is the full-time thing. Rumor has it that Apple has had discussions about similar deals with Google and Anthropic for short-term AI in various different use cases. But whatever. I raise my glue-based pizza slice to the lot of you. I'm sure this is all going to end up great.
Great. Kubernetes turns 10, which means we all need to prepare ourselves for its awkward teenage years. It's hard to believe that Kubernetes has been with us for a decade now, although I'd reckon most of us didn't actually become familiar with the term until 2016 or 2017. Starting as an open source adaptation of Google's Borg system, the first commit to the public GitHub repository was on June 6, 2014, and the world has never been the same.
So we missed its birthday. I hope you sent a card.
I did. Kubernetes joke here that I can't think of.
We'll fix it in post.
Of course. Since 99% of the world has no idea what Kubernetes is, nor do they care, saying that the world will never be the same might be overstating things by a scotch. But in the technology world, Kubernetes quickly became the de facto choice for container orchestration at scale. While other systems like Apache, Mesos, they were French, right? It's fine.
Totally.
Apache, Mesos, and Docker Swarm maintained a slim toehold on the ecosystem. Kubernetes continued to grow by leaps and bounds, finding its way onto the public clouds, on-prem offerings like OpenShift and VMware Tanzu, and even at the edge. Fun fact, Chick-fil-A has a Kubernetes cluster in every store. Weird. Kubernetes was the first project in the newly minted CNCF branch of the Linux Foundation in 2015, along with reaching version 1.0. Today, Kubernetes is the second largest open source project in the world, with version 1.30 dropping this past April. It is hard to overstate the impact that Kubernetes has had on the world of DevOps, only overshadowed by how confusing and difficult running Kubernetes continues to be. Still, it is quite an achievement for such a massive open source project to keep delivering after 10 years without completely losing its way or becoming a bloated mess. OpenStack. I'm sorry. Congratulations to everyone out there who contributes to Kubernetes. I'll see you in 5 years for your quinceañera.
Stop trying to make Sherlocking happen. It's not going to happen.
God.
Okay, but sure. The actual process of Sherlocking happens.
Mm-hmm.
But it's such a stupid term that nobody, and I mean nobody, except time crunch tech writers on a word count could possibly think the term was fun.
Mm.
The idea, though, pretty simple. A giant company like Apple sees a small application out in the wild that's cool and possibly should have been built into the operating system to begin with. The giant company that's definitely Apple then integrates identical functionality natively, thus making the tiny app irrelevant, redundant, and in many cases, bankrupt. Shady behavior? I honestly don't know. Maybe? But it at least speaks to the programming acumen on hand at Apple. Whenever stuff like this happens in Windows, Microsoft has to buy the small app out. I'm looking at you, sysinternals.
Indeed.
Anyway, there were a bunch of Sherlocked apps that were announced at the WWDC. On the list for the newest versions of iOS and macOS, which would be iOS 18 and macOS Sequoia, Apple will be releasing a standalone password manager. This is probably not going to go anywhere, because if you're using a password manager, you're not going to change to the Apple one.
No.
And Apple sort of had a password manager of itself built into the operating system already.
Mm.
Whatever. They're also releasing functionality for phone call recordings and transcriptions natively, which is definitely on the list of I can't believe this was not already a thing.
Yeah.
Next up, and one that people were super excited about, iPhone mirroring. This was already a thing, kind of. It was a functionality enough that you could use your iPhone mirror for like a WebEx presentation demonstrating app usage. But now it's a fully featured, fleshed out thing that simulates your iPhone as though it were on your computer desktop. Sure. Why not? Next up, window tiling. As in, you hit a button and all the windows that are open space down so you can see them all on the desktop. This has been a hotkey thing on Windows forever.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly since before Apple had a graphical OS. I forget who went first. But anyway, what the hell took so long?
Indeed.
And finally, well, not finally, but finally in the sense that I'm tired of talking about this, custom Bitmojis powered by AI. In case you didn't know, Bitmojis are these little graphic things that you can do inside of Apple and send to your friends, and they're very cute. But now you can create your own out of anything based on the prompt. I had no idea this was a thing that people wanted. But then again, I'm not a youth. I have never even considered wanting a Bitmoji that emotes the feeling or the image of a fox DJing. Maybe he's doing it for exposure.
Maybe. I kind of want that now.
Yeah, I kind of want that now too.
Damn it.
They got us.
Raspberry Pi pops in an IPO. Sure, Kubernetes has been around for 10... Yes?
Did you know this was happening?
Yes, I knew this was happening. How did you not know this was happening?
How come nobody tells me these things are happening?
Because you don't pay attention.
What?
Too busy with your DJ foxes. Sure, Kubernetes has been around for 10 years, but the Raspberry Pi board was released in 2012. So that's like... carry this...
70 years ago?
Yes. Originally envisioned as an ultra-low-cost single-board computer to help educate kids about computer science, the Raspberry Pi found surprising success with hobbyists, industrial automation, and robotics, to name a few. The friendly and helpful nature of their documentation and operating system made the Raspberry Pi an approachable and adaptable device that could be easily slotted into a myriad of projects. Since the original Raspberry Pi Model B, there has been a steady stream of new models and form factors like the Raspberry Pi Zero, Compute Module, and most recently, the release of the Raspberry Pi 5. Whereas the original Model B had 512 megabytes of RAM, a single-core 32-bit ARM chip running at 700 megahertz, and USB 2 speeds on the board, the newest Model 5 has 8 gigabytes of RAM, a 4-core 64-bit ARM chip running at 2.4 gigahertz, and custom chips designed by Raspberry Pi to handle things like graphics processing. Despite all the hardware advances, the cost of Raspberry Pis remains incredibly low, with the original model costing a mere $35 and the newest model costing $60. Given the rate of inflation over the past decade, that's a bump of about $10 in 2024 currency.
It's frankly absurd.
Indeed. Last week, the parent company behind Raspberry Pi held an IPO on the London Stock Exchange. The initial pricing was at 385 pence sterling, because they use weird numbers on the London Stock Exchange and I hate it. But it popped up to 485 pence sterling, which is an increase of 26%. What does that mean in actual money? Raspberry Pi Limited managed to snag $228 million in the IPO, which will be a nice little return for the early investors. I, for one, have entirely too many Raspberry Pis hanging around my basement doing nothing, and yet I have a strange itch to buy the Model 5 and also do nothing with it. Perhaps the secret ingredient behind the Raspberry Pi is obsession.
Raspberry Pi. I'll totally get to it.
All right, that's it. We're done. Go away now. Bye.